Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started and start the recording. Good evening. Welcome to Focus Session 2. I want to welcome my online students to this presentation as well. Like I said, I usually hold this for my in-person or hybrid students, but I'd love to see some of you online students on here as well. For those that can't attend, as always, I will post the presentation here tonight, and I'll send out that link. And hopefully you guys can hear my dog barking. She's going a little crazy right now. So today we're going to cover endocrine for focus session 2. I just kind of wrap up a few different things. I'll also talk about some of the key assignments coming up, along with some of the things that you might expect on the exam. And then normal etiquette, if you have any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, so again, on the agenda, some announcements, do a little bit of a quick review. I'll talk about the love-hate relationship with water, and then my top 3 for the study guide. So if you haven't looked at Canvas, our endocrine practice exercise is due tonight. These you can redo as many times as you'd like, and you save the top score. So go ahead and take this, get some practice in, see how some of the questions could turn out or how they are formatted. On Thursday night, we'll have the endocrine system quiz that's due. One attempt for that one. I do recommend taking this one. It'll give you a good sense of the questions and how they're going to be formulated for the exam. And so definitely take that if you need to, or if you can, take it a little earlier. And then Dr. Curley has time to leave you some comments for that one. The endocrine exam will open on Friday, January 31st, and it'll stay open until Sunday evening. So you do have the weekend to take the exam. So find a quiet place to sit, get some reliable internet, get yourself some coffee, a quiet place, whatever it might be, and then go ahead and take your exam. Dr. Curley did send out an exam breakout announcement. I do recommend checking that out. She breaks down the kind of questions she's going to ask, specifically the topics and how many of them. If you have looked at it, you'll notice that there's 24 questions, 50 points total. And out of the 24 questions, 12 are primarily related to the endocrine system in terms of the hormones, the targets, what the hormones do in the entire body, and that kind of thing. So it's a big chunk of the exam will be just the endocrine system from hypothalamus to target organs. And I'll quickly review that here on the next slide. So if you watched my focus session 1, I showed you this chart, this table, kind of showing you how you can formulate the endocrine system into one slide, if you will. This whiteboard drawing here actually covers a majority of objectives 2 and 4. And like I mentioned, for your exam breakdown, you'll have about 12 questions related to just what you see on this. So you can kind of, if you're thinking about how could these questions get asked, remember that the hypothalamus is our controlling organ or controlling mechanism for the endocrine system. The hypothalamus will produce 9 hormones: ADH, oxytocin. You have the growth hormone releasing hormones, growth hormone inhibiting hormone, or somatostatin, prolactin inhibiting hormone, prolactin release hormone, TRH, CRH, which one did I not say? ADH, I believe. But you can kind of see I have them color coded here as orange. From here, the hormones will split and kind of act a little differently. So the ADH and oxytocin are neurohormones. Those travel along the nervous system and directly talk with the posterior pituitary gland. Here, those 2 hormones circulate in the posterior pituitary gland until they are needed. And when they're needed, the posterior pituitary gland will then secrete them. ADH will then make its way out to the kidney and increase the water retention in the body, whereas oxytocin will make its way out to the gonads and increase milk release if you are a female, or the development of the love hormone if you are with your significant other. The other seven inhibiting and releasing hormones, those do not directly do anything to the other organs. What they do is that they will travel through the portal system, which is typically a blood vessel, making its way to the anterior pituitary gland. These hormones will then act on the anterior pituitary gland and force it to make other hormones, which will then go to our organs to go do specific actions. So, for example, if I start with the hypothalamus wants you to, let's say, grow overnight because you're young or you're developing. So the hypothalamus will release growth hormone releasing hormone. It'll then make its way through the portal system to the anterior pituitary gland. The anterior pituitary gland will get that hormone and it'll be triggered to make more growth hormone. Then it'll make that growth hormone and it'll secrete it and then it'll release growth hormone to the specific cells the hypothalamus wants to grow. And that'll trigger the growth or development of those cells or uh, the freezing or the stopping of the growth. Um, I think the example I used was with TRH and CRH last week. So if you're curious about that one, go ahead and take a look at that video from Focus Session 1. But ideally, you can describe the pathway of hypothalamus secreting a hormone, doing an action, either acting on the posterior pituitary or anterior pituitary, and then what comes after that, what organs are affected, and then ultimately what happens at the very end. If you can summarize that in your own words for these major nine hormones, you're going to do very well on this exam. Ideally, you have something similar to this already, either in your own table, your own drawings, whatever it might be. But if you decide to skip this or not necessarily study this in depth, just remember that half of your questions can be asked on things just in this picture alone. Okay, so one of the concepts, this will be a question. I think you'll have either one or two questions on this from what I saw. It's going to ask you about properties of hormones. One of the properties that students do get confused is the difference between a hydrophobic hormone and a hydrophilic hormone. So you can kind of see there, hydrophobic hormones, they hate water. They're usually lipid or fat based. They act on intracellular receptors, and I'll explain what that means here in the next slide. But the key takeaway for this is that hydrophobic hormones are primarily your steroid hormones. So if we go back to this slide, I mentioned sex hormones and the adrenal cortex hormones. So again, if you go to your sex hormones, we know that your testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, those are considered steroids. And you know that you can take testosterone supplements, things like that. But your adrenal cortex or your vital hormones, these aldosterone, cortisol, again, you see testosterone and estrogen. Anything released by that has the ONE ending at it is usually a steroid, or anything that is released by the adrenal cortex is considered a steroid. If you see those two or any of these that I mentioned here, those are considered steroids, and therefore they are hydrophobic or fat-based hormones. I want to focus on this one mostly because all other hormones are hydrophilic or they love water. So instead of trying to remember which ones are hydrophobic, which ones are hydrophilic, if you remember which ones are hydrophobic, your steroid hormones. So I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, actually really 5. And I believe your notes have a few other hormones. If you know those as hydrophobic, then the other ones are hydrophilic. So hydrophilic hormones, they are water-based. They actually absorb in your bloodstream, which is primarily water. They act via membrane-bound receptors. And like I said, they are every other hormone besides the steroid hormones. So I tell you that, hey, uh, let's see, let me pick one random one over here. So is insulin a hydrophobic or a hydrophilic hormone? Well, you know that insulin is not a steroid, so it's got to be a hydrophilic hormone. The questions are going to be a little bit more, more detailed than that. You'll have some options for drop down. So the question might ask you, this gland releases X hormone, which is a hydrophobic or hydrophilic, which does this. And so a lot of these options are drop down. So I could say the adrenal cortex releases cortisol, which is a hydrophobic hormone, which helps with, in this case, increasing blood glucose. So that's just an example of how a question could be formulated in your exam. And you can see that that one question asked you four different things, and you'll get a point or half a point for each of those options. So kind of explain what this means with hydrophobic, hydrophilic, and how they get to where they need to go. So again, we have our secreting gland, so one of the endocrine glands we mentioned before. If you're a hydrophobic uh, um, hormone, you don't like to travel in water. You hate water. So we have a transport protein that will attach to the hydrophobic hormone, and then the hormone will basically ride this protein through your blood vessels until it gets close to where your target cell is. Once it gets there, the the protein will release the hydrophobic hormone into your interstitial space or the space between your blood vessels and other things like your cells, your organs, etc. And the hydrophobic hormone will then go into the target cell. So if you remember down in um, Quinn, I'll answer your question here in a little bit. That's a good point. Um, where was I? Oh, sorry. So if you remember from Bio 181, 182, that our plasma membranes are made out of um, they're made out of lipids. They're made out of fat. So you have a certain a circle with a cone on it, if you remember it. So you have the head and the tail of the lipid. And then on the opposite side of the membrane, you also have a head or a tail, and it's fat based. So what happens with a hydrophobic or a fat based hormone is that because it's fat going through plasma membrane that's also made out of lipid or fat, it can just go straight through the membrane and it'll go into the cell, go into an area in the cell that then triggers it to do the action we're asking for. So like growth hormone, for example, or um, testosterone, it's going to go straight into the cell and then act on that cell. If you're a hydrophilic hormone, what it'll do is you'll have a secretion of the endocrine gland. Because you're hydrophilic, you love water, you don't need a transport protein, so you'll ride the blood vessel all the way through. You'll be released into the interstitial space, and then remember that water and fat don't really mix. If you've ever kind of put like oil in the sink, you'll kind of see that there's always a good barrier between the two. They don't like to mix at all. So a water-based hormone will not be able to cross our plasma membrane. It gets repelled or rejected from it. So instead, you have a membrane-bound receptor, so a receptor on the outside. The hormone will land on that receptor, and then on the inside of the cell, there's a separate signaling, like a chemical signal, that when this is attached, it releases a chemical signal into the cell to then do the action that we wanted it to do based on the hormone or the endocrine gland. Quinn, so one of the questions that Quinn brought up, so this lesson also says that the thyroid hormone is hydrophobic. So if I go back over here, your thyroid hormone, which is your T3 and T4, let me look at that real quick because there's always exceptions to the rule. Let's see, T3 and T4. So that is correct. So T3 and T4 are hydrophobic. Great point, Quinn. As always, that's like a general rule of thumb is your steroids, but yes, T3 and T4 are considered hydrophobic hormones. So Quinn, sounds like you read the notes. That's perfect. That's another thing you can add to your list. But so I'll go ahead and add that to our normal one. So steroid hormones and your thyroid hormones are also considered hydrophobic. Thank you very much, Quinn, for that. And as always, if anything sounds confusing, you're like, oh, I saw this in the notes or I saw this in the lecture, go ahead and let me know. because I'd rather you have the correct information than not have the correct information. And then worst case, if I can't find it in the notes or I kind of feel a little lost, I'll go back, I'll look through the notes, make sure I can find the right answer for you, and then I'll always get it back to you. Okay, and so just to wrap up, my top three. So if you don't remember, I mentioned the lecture exam or the lecture study guide. We have a study guide for every module. In this case, for endocrine, my top three are review question 3, 7, and 8. Now, since we have a little bit of time, I'm going to go ahead and open it. Actually, the first thing I want to open is and I'm going to go ahead and share this one. Okay. So right now you should be seeing Dr. Curley's announcement. It's both posted in the hybrid and the online class. So again, you see the 24 questions. You'll see that it's due on on February 2nd, which is this Sunday. And you can kind of see the breakdown of your questions. So one question explaining the relationship between hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, one question regarding blood glucose regulation, one question regarding the nervous system versus endocrine system. But now we've got 9 questions, general endocrine system, including hormones, glands, receptors, and target tissues, which goes back to that one-page summary chart that I showed you. 3 are hormone properties, which is kind of why I decided to go over hydrophobic versus hydrophilic here. 2 are matching questions for hormones and their functions. 2 are cell signaling. And then 5 are your endocrine disorders, which are towards the end of your lecture. One thing to note for these, for Dr. Curley's tests, you don't have to write anything. There's no single page or single line question. There's no short answer. Everything that you're going to see is going to be multiple choice. It's going to be drop down, matching, or what she'll say is multiple blanks where you click on the box and you'll have 3 or 4 options to choose from and you'll select the correct one and move along. So again, if you go to modules, and I did share this last week, but I'm going to go ahead and share it again for those that did not catch my video last week. If I go to lecture intro, you'll see exam study guide. We'll open the exam study guide. And again, the questions that I'm focusing on as my big 3 are 3. Describe the relationship between hypothalamus and pituitary gland, including the HPA tract system, HPA portal system. What are your releasing inhibiting hormones? Where they're released from? Where do they target? And again, which hormones are released from the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary? And briefly describe the action of these hormones on their targets. You can kind of see how everything that we kind of talked about on that last slide is really covered here. Is do you know where the hormones are secreted, where they're produced, where they act, and in general, what their overall function is. I mentioned review question 7, which again is name and locate the main endocrine glands and briefly describe the hormones and functions of these glands. And then here's your list. Kind of like I mentioned before, if you've got it all down in that one-page summary, you'll have this one covered. And then I did focus on the relationship between insulin, glucagon, glycogen, and glucose. Since I did not cover it in this review, I did want you to take a look at that. That is objective 5, kind of talking about how our body reacts when we are eating immediately after we eat, or if we decide to do a fasting state where we're not eating for a while, and how blood sugar is regulated in our body based on whether we just ate or whether we have not eaten in a while. Okay, and I'll go back and jump into this one. Okay, so the final thing I have to mention is I want you to all remember that you have your 5 success tokens. I believe Dr. Curley calls them like golden tickets, golden tokens. Those you can use to retake your exam. So if you've taken your exam and you're not happy with the score, I would immediately message Dr. Curley. She can authorize you to take a retake of the exam. Again, you only get to use this token 5 times a semester, but they're not worth anything if you don't use them. So they're not worth extra credit points at the end of the semester. So if you take this test and you're like, man, I could have done much better, just message Dr. Curley, use that token, retake the exam so you can get a better score. I see a lot of students go throughout the semester and they'll kind of leave 2, 3, or 4 tokens at the end of the semester. And really, if they had used it, they would have gotten a much better grade than if they had held on to them. So if you take this quiz or this exam, you're not happy with it, just use the token. Um, you can use your token for missing assignments, but I'll just tell you, I think I would just personally take the 0 on the 10-point assignment and save the credits or the tokens for the bigger assignments like the exams, especially being able to retake an exam. Not a lot of teachers let you do that. There's one of the classes that does let you do that. So I recommend holding on to them and using that token if you feel you want to get a better score. Besides that, that's all I have for you all. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we log off? Um, Quinn, I believe you are in the online class, so it's not actually extra credit. For the the in-person and hybrid classes, it's actually part of their grade to attend 7 of my sessions. But for the online students, this is extra for you. Again, because you're an online only student, you're not necessarily expected to be in a session like this at a specific time during a specific day. So it's optional for y'all to attend and watch the videos, but hopefully it's at least valuable information that kind of helps with the stuff you're already getting with Dr. Curley's lecture. But okay, if I have no other
Okay, I'm
questions.
sorry. I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute myself.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Wait, so you're saying because I'm online, the 50 points doesn't go towards my grade?
Yeah. This is that you don't get. So for the in-person students, they're required to attend 7 of these sessions. So it's part of their grade.
Got you.
Because you're online and we don't want to force you to be kind of, like I said, in a specific place or a specific time. That's not what you signed up for. So these are optional for you to get extra information.
Got you. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much for everyone that attended. Share the video with your friends that could not make it here today. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.